Yes, let me also start by congratulating EQUiTOR and Ramesh on the achievement of the last 20 years. And he was reminding me the other day that it all began with a dinner he and I had in New York all those years ago. Your journey over the last 20 years has been investing in brands and helping branded companies. My journey over the last 20 years has been the very opposite end of the scale, if you like. I've been working with different poor communities in Sudan, in Uganda, and for the last 12 years or so here in South Africa. And that's caused me to reflect on what we mean by value when we talk about brands. If we go back to where brands first emerged in the Industrial Revolution, their success and the reason why some of our original branded goods companies emerged, and Unilever is a perfect example of that, of course, Hindustan Lever in your part of the world, was taking products which were unreliable, creating reliable versions of those products, and using branding to reassure customers that every time they bought a bar of soap, it was going to be the same quality as the previous bar of soap. So there was genuine value to the customer from the product that was made. If I look at the current list of the world's most valuable brands, what I see is a whole lot of names which are attached to promises, visions, dreams. It all seems very fanciful, and in fact, in many ways, is manipulative. Nike is successful as a company not because it makes better shoes, but because it makes better adverts than other companies. And I see people in this part of the world who barely can afford to pay for food, can barely afford to pay rent, but their children are nagging them to have the right brand of shoes because of the success of the advertising, not because they're good for their feet or because they will actually help them run faster. Coke regularly comes up in the list of the world's most valuable brands because Coke has done a fantastically good job at persuading people that instead of drinking water, which is the most healthy thing they could drink, they drink a product which is actually destroying their intestines and destroying their teeth. And even when they do sell water, they just take tap water and put it in a bottle and brand it. So we seem to have lost our sense of what the point of brands is. Is it actually to help customers, or is it just to make money for the companies? And therefore, when we reflect on the value of brands, I'm a little anxious that 20 years, more than 20 years after the brand valuation industry began, it's still focused on the one single target of value, which is value to the shareholder. All of the models of brand valuation, the one pioneered by Interbrand, the ones used by you guys, by other companies around the world, are all focused effectively on the cash which is coming to the company by virtue of using its brand. And there are different ways of tweaking that, but essentially it's about money coming to the shareholder. And so Amazon gets a great score for the value of its brand and gets a lot of credit for the way it helps consumers. I completely admit Amazon is a great benefit to consumers who want to buy stuff cheaply. There's absolutely no reflection in that value on the way it exploits its staff, the way it has destroyed smaller retailers, the way it's completely wiped out huge numbers of fantastically important local bookstores by undercutting them and by selling the products the way they do. So yes, it's made value for Amazon's shareholders, absolutely. But has it actually made value for society? Has it made society a better place? And if you look through that list of of the world's most valuable brands, with each of them, I'm not entirely sure that the world is better for the presence of a lot of those companies or a lot of those brands. And I think we deceive ourselves into thinking that. If you feel I'm being a little too fanciful, let me give you a comparison. 20 years ago, we looked at mining companies purely in terms of how much money they brought to shareholders. And we recognized their job was to extract stuff from the ground and to make money out of doing it. And the fact that they were destroying forests and destroying large parts of the planet was completely ignored because at least they were making money for shareholders. Now we're appalled at the thought that mining companies should be allowed to get away with that. And that's why there's been a lot of the focus on both mining companies and fuel companies, the impact of climate change and pollution and so on. I would suggest that most of our big brands are also extractive companies. They're extracting money from consumers. And yes, you might say, well, if the consumers are unhappy, they go somewhere else. And eventually they do, but only after one generation has had money extracted from their pockets, usually money they can barely afford. So every time I see poor families around here going to buy McDonald's or KFC and paying a premium for unhealthy food, when they could use the same money to buy healthier food, what I'm seeing is not value being created, but actually value being extracted.
Right. So let me ask Mr. Reiki on this. Living off a brand and adding to it in terms of all stakeholders. What is your take, and how do you think boards should look at the point that this very critical point that Raymond just raised?
I think Raymond has raised a very, very important point. Are brands exploiting the consumer? And he's given a few examples. I don't think anybody can challenge them, Raymond. I think you're spot on. And there will be many more companies in that list if we go down that list. And I think what has happened is most companies with deep pockets are able to invest a lot of money in advertising and are able to get mind space of people, because that's what, when you put on your television, that's what you see, or on your social media, wherever you go, you're seeing them there. But I think it is time that there are two ways to look at it. When a brand gets built, and let's talk of the more ethical brands that have got built, because there are people who have exploited it for making money for their shareholders and not the entire stakeholders. When you're talking stakeholders, you're talking the community at large. There are ethical companies which have done the right way. You gave the example of Unilever. And I think when Paul Pullman came in and he brought in this whole sustainability agenda and environment friendly, I think he suffered a lot in the beginning. The company was not doing so well financially, but ultimately they succeeded, and we see where the company is today in shareholder value. So there are many companies like Unilever who have actually followed that way and have actually done it. So that, the way I look at a brand, suppose a brand gets built over many years. It takes many years to build a brand. Spoke about Nike, spoke about whether Infosys also. It's taken many years to build the brand. Now, every person who works in this company actually represents that brand in some way. Their products and their people represent the brand. So two ways you can do it. Either you can add to that brand through better products, more innovation, making it more eco-friendly. And today, I think one topic that I want to throw into this whole thing is this whole ESG part of it. How are we on the environmental kind of thing? Because it's become very important today, climate change and the way our environment is getting impacted. So people are going to look at it. I'll give you one small example. Brands do what is right. So if you say that this is legally right, but you have to ask the question, is it ethically right? Does my moral compass actually get me there? And I'll give you one small example of this. A newspaper report came in London saying that Starbucks does not pay any taxes in the UK. And you know what happened after that? For a week, people did not go to Starbucks. Suddenly their cafes became empty. People were not going there. Starbucks goes and puts 20 million pounds, pays taxes in the UK, saying we don't owe the taxes, but we are paying it. They want their customers back. So I think the point is that, and there are many such examples like this, how people, operate or do it. But I think people are going to look at the ethics part of it. And I think these are being questioned. And I would also add to it the higher purpose of organizations. And when I talk of higher purpose, it is which is beyond making profits. It is how do you give back to society and how you're actually being an important aspect of it. Commercial organizations, being commercial organizations, exist to make profits. But if that existence will be short-lived over a period of time, and in today's competitive world with the startup community and everybody else coming in the millenniums, challenging and asking a lot of questions as to how you give back and how you're actually being environmental friendly, I think these things are going to be challenged. So I think you could do two ways. Either you add to the brand through your conduct, through your behavior, through how you're actually dealing with environment, society, etc., or you can live off the brand. You got a big name, keep doing what you want and keep making money. But let me tell you, Raymond, while this will go on, there is an end date to it. There's an end date, and that end date can come very fast. So you can pump in all the money you want, but at some point of time, it is going to crash. And we can see, I do not know how many of you are aware, but the OECD is coming out now next year, early next year with taxes. You can't now, no money can escape tax. So a lot of these things are now going to get, so many of these things will get rectified over a period of time. And I think brands need to do it before it becomes a regulation. Why can't you not do it and be honest about it? So I think honesty, authenticity needs to come, trust needs to come there back.
And should this be an oversight at the board level? And how
100%.
From the top down?
100%. The board should oversee this. A responsible board should oversee it. But the problem what comes up with boards is, I'm not sure how many of them will actually go beyond that call of duty and say, okay, call out that this is not right because the company is making huge profits and all that. But I think it's time to plow back some of that and do the right things instead of, because you can only do the right things when you're making big money. Okay, let me read this thing. You have the opportunity of doing it because you're making that money to do it, put it in the right place, not when you're down and out and you've been in a bad situation.
Right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Virmani, I think Infosys has been an early proponent of the idea that Raymond was trying to bring in, that we need, I think one of Mr. Narayan Murthy's quote was, longevity and success of a company needs to happen by living in harmony in the context in which it operates, right? And I think that's a vision that is focused also in your ESG 2030 goals that you have taken for itself. And I know that before ESG became a concept, Infosys was already working towards that. And with the CEO being responsible for some of that, how do you feel the role of the CEO and the head table can bring about the change that Raymond is speaking of through your brands?
Siddharth, thanks for actually bringing that quote back and reinforcing the elements of ESG. I think both what Raymond and Mr. Riki talked about today, I would say, is manifesting in multiple ways across brand. I don't think we've heard about purpose-driven brands more than we have heard, say, in the last couple of years. But a lot of examples, when, for example, when COVID hit 2 years ago, I mean, you certainly saw a lot of backlash around brands who were taking decisions that were completely against the purpose that they had espoused in the past. So clearly, I guess defining the why of a brand upfront ends up helping you to, drive the steps that you should take towards achieving the aspiration of the brand. Now, talking about your question about the role of the CEO or the role of the board, my sense is that unlike the situation was possibly a few decades ago, I don't think it's unusual in today's day and age where companies across sectors and regions don't just have a well-defined brand aspiration, they're actually taking steps to articulate what their larger purpose to the society is. What's their larger commitment to ESG? ESG is not fashionable anymore. It's become an integral part of how clients look at you. It's become an integral part of how investors look at you. And therefore, you're seeing more and more companies coming out and sign the ESG pledges that are out there. More and more companies outlining their goals. More and more companies defining where they are vis-a-vis the 2050 commitments that the world has made towards sustainability. So clearly, the elements of larger purpose towards realizing the brand ambitions is no more a matter of choice. It's frankly a matter of survival.
Great. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Virmani. Raymond, coming back to you again. So 30 years ago, you threw the challenge to the accountants that there is a significant portion of value that you're missing, and stakeholders, including the top table, needs to take cognizance of it and therefore work towards it. What is the challenge do you think we should take today, throw to the boards and the leadership of the companies today in terms of the role that brands can play in enabling a better world?
I think we need to recognize that the historic role of companies, which is effectively a private depository of capital to then develop a business and exploit it, is no longer the best way of understanding businesses. Businesses like Google and Facebook and Amazon and so on have a huge influence on our lives, on our world. People talk about these as the new utilities, and in a sense they are. So having boards of these companies which are effectively only responsible to the shareholders, is allowing companies to judge themselves by their own standards and by their own vision. If we had people on the board of Amazon who were asking serious questions about the impact that they have on wider retail, the impact that they have on the environment, the impact that they have on consumer choice, and not just on prices, then I think we might see some different decisions being made. But there's no mechanism to do that, because boards are appointed by the shareholders, and the shareholders are interested in extracting value. That's fine. I understand why shareholders want to do that. We all benefit from that. We all have investments either directly or indirectly in businesses, and we want our pension funds to be as successful as they can be. But that we shouldn't continue to tolerate a world in which companies effectively hold the rest of the planet to ransom, whether we see the rest of the planet in terms of the environment, in terms of poor people who have no voice, in terms of workers who have no power. You mentioned Starbucks earlier, and yes, there was outrage that Starbucks didn't pay taxes, and so rather like the Queen, it rather generously decided to gift some taxes to Her Majesty's government. But at the same time, we've only Starbucks, I think, has only just recognized one store in the States with unionized workers. Are we really willing to tolerate a world in which we praise this company because it makes, I think, frankly, quite mediocre coffee, while consistently exploiting the people who deliver that service and making a lot of money for shareholders? It worries me that we just don't have the right mechanisms in place to hold companies accountable, and brands are just a small part of that.
Thank you for that very interesting perspective, Raymond. Just a follow-up to that. Do you believe there is any brand today which is doing the right thing for all its stakeholders, which is not extracting but also giving back in any way?
There's always a danger if you answer that question positively, because in 2 days' time, I fear that it's going to be a curse if I mention anybody. I'm going to say Unilever again because I mentioned them earlier, and Mr. Recchi very appropriately named them. I think Unilever has a lot to teach us about what it is to be in business, why you're in business, and looking at business not for the next quarter or even the next 5 years, but for the next 100 years. And I think their understanding of their customers, I see how they operate in this country. They have, in fact, their African head office is just up the road from me, further along the coast in Durban. They are, to me, a company that we can learn a lot from. And it worries me that the technology companies we have, yes, you're quite right, they won't be around forever, but they will have extracted a lot of value before they do so. And they're not building brands over a long period of time. Most of those brands are 5, 10, 15 years old. They will be gone. It's hard to imagine. But obviously, Google and Facebook and so on will not be around in 20 years' time because they weren't around 20 years ago. And they will have, like the mining companies who destroy a piece of land and then move on to the next thing, those shareholders will have moved on to the next exploitative business.
Thank you for that. Mr. Virmani, in this kind of a context where brands are being looked at being more than consumer facing or customer facing and need to take into account the whole ecosystem in which we operate, how do you think the custodians of the brands like yourself would like to take it to the top table? What are the things that you would like to do to take the brand to the top table?
The top, let me just understand
the boardroom. Right. The board.
All right, brands to the boardroom. Okay. Yeah. See, I guess the responsibility, the way I see it, is responsibility for marketers like us has to ensure that when we are thinking marketing, we are not thinking the next shiny thing or the next creative leap. We are actually defining the aspiration of the brand, which is in tune with the language being spoken at the boardrooms. And I think that is where over the last couple of decades, I have seen that the fundamentals that a lot of us learned way back in management schools about the 4 Ps of marketing. We've forgotten the 3 Ps and we've largely focused our attention on the P of promotion that we all love the best, and the beauty of the next ad that's going to come out of the celebrity endorser we are going to sign. And I think that's one of the reasons why possibly the importance of brands has receded in the boardrooms, because we marketeers speak an alien language that the C-suite finds it difficult to relate to. And in my view, therefore, if we have to actually reclaim that position of relevance and impact at the C-suite or at the boardrooms, we need to possibly invent a whole new P of marketing, and which is what I call performance marketing, where when we are thinking about brands, we are thinking about brands in the context of how they are defining the larger aspirations of the business. I mean, let's take the example of ESG itself that we talked about so much in the last 5 minutes. How many of us as marketeers and brand leads have a defined aspiration for an ESG goal that which you would like your stakeholders to relate the brand with? And how often is that tracked? Is the marketer actually sticking his or her neck out to be able to deliver towards that goal? And therefore, without belaboring the point that I wish to essentially make is, if we have to have a serious shot at making an impact of brand becoming more and more relevant in the boardrooms, brand matrix and brand language has to follow the same narrative as the rest of the C-suite and not live in a fairyland that we often at times have lived in, at least at times, if not always.
Right. Got it. That was, I think, quite clear and quite illuminating us also. Mr. Reiki, coming to you, what would you like to see the role of the brand in the future? How do you foresee, and what would you like to see the role?
See, I think the one context I'd like to put, generally we say brand, we give it to the marketing department and saying you own this brand. I think it's wrong, because I think the brand gets built by the way the company operates, the people they hire, the products they do, the innovation they create. And I think, honestly, if you ask me, there should be less significance being placed. I think companies need to become responsible. If companies become responsible, I think profits will follow. Honestly, profits will follow. But we do the right thing by the customers, by the planet. Otherwise, nobody will exist. None of us will exist. The planet will exist, but none of us will be there. There'll be some other people, some other species will exist here, because we will not be able to exist on this planet. So I think it is a responsibility of corporates. And the problem with these big tech is they are unregulated today. You've seen it in the US, they've become unmanageable, unregulated. And the issue is that's why regulations need to keep pace with companies which come up, the new startups. If you see, the question comes up, these startups are going at such high valuations. Nobody understands the valuations, right? They're all loss-making companies and the valuations are so high. And then on the other hand, if you look at the employees, they're completely unhappy. So how can it be a company getting valued so much in the stock market, or it's coming with an IPO, and employees are absolutely unhappy and they just want to quit the company, and you look at that chatter and it doesn't connect. So somewhere along the line, I think there needs to be some soul searching by companies. Come back to the table, come back to reality. I thought COVID would bring a lot of reality to a lot of us, but I'm not sure it did enough of it, or it was not, it brought us back to our senses for some period of time. I live in a city, I live in Bangalore. And, when you used to walk out on the road, suddenly you found, oh, you could breathe here. And, it looked so clean. Flowers came out and looked like, whether you're in Bangalore or in some Western country. And then suddenly it all went, we are back to the traffic jams. We are back to everything else. So I think somewhere along the line, I think we as people need to be responsible. And I think we should not just say marketing head is responsible for the brand. Everybody's responsible for the brand, I would say, including the board. But the board only has oversight. It's the management which needs to run it, and it comes from how we actually live our brand. And that living of that brand, I will come back to this word because it's very close to my heart, which is higher purpose. Because if we have a higher purpose and we truly believe in it, you see, it's not on our screensavers, it's not out there in the cafeterias, but it's how we live it. And if we can live it, and if the leader can live it, he can set it down. I mean, if you look at Infosys, a standing example, when there was nothing known as corporate governance, right? They stood by it and they took some decisions. I know because I've been hearing some of those stories, of what decisions they took in very tough times. and they stood by it. It clearly shows where it is. And then the House of Tatas is another example. Raymond, if you're talking about, I think the House of Tatas would be another group which we would look at, people who actually live their brand and the brand promise and other things which come out of it. So I think these are some great examples from India which have come out and which the world can learn from. In fact, I do not know how many of you picked up Mr. Jamshedji, the owner, the person promoter of the Tata Group, was the top 10 philanthropists in the world over the last 100 years.
Yeah,
which speaks a lot for what they do.
Got it. And that was, thank you for that, Mr. Rekhi. Just since we brought up Tata in this discussion, I'd just like to tell everybody who's listening, Raymond was the one actually who did the very first valuation of the Tata Sons brand.
Okay.
Way back in 1997.
So Raymond, if you do it now, would you do it differently on the lighter side?
Well, I guess it depends what the purpose is. The purpose is to define a financial value for shareholders. Then the models that were created still have some credibility. I think I think they've been sorely tested. I'm just happened to glance at the Interbrand league table while we've been chatting, and not something I've looked at, I suspect, for 20 years. And I'm really shocked to see how many brands are on that list that are clearly just fashions. They happen to be the technology fashion at the moment. How can you put alongside brands like Chanel and so on that have been around for hundreds of years, something like Tesla? I mean, it's absurd. They clearly are not valuable in the same sense. There's really we must be careful that, as they say, that we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid. We're not being deceived by our own publicity. But if I was asked to value the Tata brands or the Amazon brand or the Lever brands from the point of view of the genuine value of them, then the models that we have are wholly inadequate because they are capturing only one very small part of it. I'm glad you do mention Tata. Yes, an incredibly impressive organization, and I think, yes, from my understanding of them, an organization which always looks at value to the wider community and not just to shareholders.
Got it. Thank you, Raymond, for that. We are at the end of the time. We have one question that I would like to bring in before I close the session. It's from the audience. It's about that a brand inherently represents a promise made to the user while making a tangible profit for the brand owner. Thus, if it is done in a fair and judicious manner, presumably there will be no issues. So how does one diligently manage both these objectives without malice? Should profit be shamed? That's the question.
If I can answer, I think it depends on the basis of the profit. So the danger of tying it to the promise is that obviously the company is deciding for itself what the promise is. So McDonald's make a promise to their customers. It delivers on that promise. What they don't explain to their customers is how they are destroying their health and destroying their wallets in the process. And not just McDonald's, all the fast food companies fall into the same category. So they are delivering on a promise, but it's always a bit of a loaded promise, and very few companies are genuinely truthful about what their products and what their services are actually doing to their customers and what they're doing to the wider world.
Right. Got it. Anybody else has any other point of view?
I may add, I think vilifying profit is pretty easy. I guess that's an easy scapegoat for anyone. But to me, the core is all about when you are starting this larger journey, and every business is not a not-for-profit business, so obviously there's going to be an element of profit in any business. But what is the larger why? How much time has been spent in the organization to define that why? And is that why going beyond the profit objective and serving the larger community? As long as brands and businesses have invested time to articulate that why, and that why defines the behavior of the organization, I guess we are going to be having lesser problems of the kinds that possibly Raymond was alluding to. But again, that's easier said than done. And we know historically very few brands have been able to define a strong why and then walk the talk.
Yeah, but Siddharth, I would try to add to Sumit's. I think having a profit is not bad.
Right.
It's the way you earn the profit.
Yeah.
And I don't think the objective should be to make profit. So can there be a purpose for the profit, if want to put it, and what I think Sumit said was the why. And I think that's a very, very difficult question to answer. But once we get that answer, I'm sure we will get there.
Thank you for that. I think we are at the end of our sessions. Thank you so much, Mr. Reiki, Mr. Virmani, and Raymond for sharing your very thoughtful and pertinent views and different perspective to the entire idea of how brands can be part of the boardroom and what they can do. I would like to hand it over now to Tarun back for the next panel to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a very, very exciting panel, and the discussion clearly is completely extraordinary. I would just like to, I hope that the audience members got the gist that the responsibility of the brand is not just towards the customer, but towards the community and to the world as well. And profits are secondary behind the purpose for profit. And how the brand is pivotal, and ESG cannot just be a line item in just be a garnish in the dish that the brand itself is. And in the words of Mr. Virmani about marketing and how it has forgotten 4 Ps and has only stuck to 1 P, I guess there lies the answer to our entire panel as to how do you get the brands to the boardroom, is by simply beginning and simply using the first step by speaking their language. Let's talk performance. Let's get brands into the boardroom. I would now like to bring out our next panel, our fireside chat. I would now like to introduce our guest for the fireside chat, Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt. Mr. Bhatt began his career in 1978 as a management trainee at Godrej and Boyce Manufacturing Company. After spending 5 years with Godrej, he joined Tata, a firm that he retired on 30th September 2019 after serving as the managing director of the company from April 2002 to September 2019. Titan Company Limited, under Mr. Bhatt's leadership, enlarged its portfolio and extended its market to eyewear, accessories, fragrances, sarees. The market cap of the Titan Company grew to $13 billion in 2019, and now is the second largest in the Tata Group. Mr. Bhatt graduated in mechanical engineering from IIT Madras and completed his PGDM in IIM Ahmedabad. He has been conferred the Distinguished Alumnus Award at IIT Madras and IIM Ahmedabad. Mr. Bhatt is also a director in Tata Sons Private Limited, Titan Company, Trent, and chairman of the board of Rallis India and Tata SIA, Vistara. He's also the lead independent director in Bosch India Limited. Welcome, Mr. Bhatt.
Hi.
And chatting with him this evening is Mr. Ramesh Jude Thomas. As the president and CEO of EQUITOR Value Advisory, RJD is a pioneer in the area of applying brand value for transformational growth. He set up EQUITOR, India's first ISO certified brand valuation and transformation consultancy 2 decades ago. In 2001, EQUITOR partnered with Interbrand, as we were introduced earlier, to bring in 30 years of worldwide expertise and thought leadership in leveraging brands as pure business assets. He has worked with some of the top business leaderships in the country and abroad, including Tata Sons, Infosys, Murugappa Group, Titan Industries, sovereign governments, and large not-for-profit organizations as well. He's often called upon by business media, industry associations, and business schools to share a perspective on the future of the intangible economy. Speaking of which, I would like to welcome RJT to quiz Mr. Bhatt and have a conversation about how intangibles can be the force multipliers for the 21st century economy. Over to you, RJT.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bhaskar, for being here. But a formal introduction to Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt in a gathering such as this is akin to reading out Jeff Bezos' profile in a US business conference. Everybody knows. Before I launch into the question I have for him, it might be worth just touching upon 1 or 2 of the slightly less publicized attributes of the gentleman's long and illustrious career. We at EQUITOR had the great privilege of working alongside Bhaskar when he had just taken over the reins of Titan Industries. And the numbers at that point of time didn't look pretty at all, not by a mile. It's that same firm today, as Tarun just told us, has a market value of over 2 trillion INR and has risen to become the second most valuable company in the whole Tata Group, it is largely a testament to the quality of leadership that marked this period of change. 4,000x appreciation is not a joke. This leadership was marked by two defining traits: leadership by empathy and leadership by example. That each person mattered in making big things happen. Employee, franchisee, distributor, vendor, contract worker, doesn't matter. Now, if a vendor in Guntur is celebrating his daughter's wedding, Mr. Bhatt is right there. Believe me, I'm talking from experience. Equally, by example, if we implemented a nationwide market visit program for all senior executives to understand better what the consumer is saying in the shop, he is the first to pack his bags and leave. Bhaskar, it's an absolute privilege to have you with us on this milestone day. Thank you so much on behalf of the entire EQUITOR community that is gathered here today. So on this business of intangible assets and the current economy, your vantage position is a unique one in many ways. And against this position, I have a few queries. Okay. I want to start with the latest headline from our largest business group. Air India has come home after decades. The group will soon be the largest player in the heavily capitalized and regulated business of aviation. How do you see intangibles like the brand and the service offerings that these companies have playing a significant role in creating value in the context of such heavy capitalization?
Thank you, EQUITOR and RJT. It's been an exceptional journey, and I think we participated perhaps early part of your journey, and I'm glad we did. Particularly Napina, exceptional articulation, both in prose and content. I was just floored. I mean, I didn't know you did so many things. As well as the panel before this, it just lit up this whole evening for me, all the points. Well, coming back to your question, you talked about the second largest market cap company, Titan being the second largest. I want to start there to answering your question. I think I shared this with you, and I'm happy to publicly state it. There was a day when, I don't know, maybe 8 years, 9 years back, when a reporter, a journalist, called me and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Bhatt. Titan just became the #2 and crossed Tata Steel in market cap, and what a great company. Can we talk about it?" So I was appalled, I was appalled. And I said, I think you are comparing a great company with a good company. Titan, yes, we run it as a good company. We are still growing. We are new. But Tata Steel is where the spirit of the group lives. It's not just a company. It's an institution. And, just because the market has delivered some number in the BSE stock exchange, it doesn't mean Titan is the same question was asked, I think, a few months back. I don't know whether Venkat was asked, but it came up again, and unanimously in Titan, everybody said, look, this Tata Steel Titan, it is no comparison. The greatness of a company, like the previous panel actually discussed, is not just in what the market signs off as the PE multiple, because it is category, it is retail, I don't know, 100 things. Coming back to Air India and aviation and so on, it's not yet with us. It's going to be a while. But I think it's a very good example of, following up on the work that, the discussions of the previous half an hour, 40 minutes. Air India, let's leave the Tata Group's aviation position out. Let's talk of Air India. It has India in it. And if I were to take India 60, 70 years back, what it stood for the people in India and what India stands for the people in India today. There was great pride in the nation at that time. There is great pride in the nation today as well, even greater pride perhaps. And somebody talked about it. I think Mr. Veeramani spoke about it. It is no longer just, I'm not saying only, just, standing up to the national anthem and saluting the flag and, feeling great about our freedom struggle. I think India and Indians have performed. Therefore, Air India in that context, there is a great undercurrent. There's a great undercurrent and a feeling for the brand amongst Indians. It has underperformed on obviously key metrics that a brand needs to perform, which is, on-time performance, service, food, network, pricing, whatever you have, apart from, the profitability. And I think it failed on all those metrics. But today, correcting those will simply set it right. But more than that, I think this whole rising pride in India is really going to prop up that brand and make that brand fly even higher than I believe. And that is where this intangible that you are talking about, and I can add many things to that. It is how India has done well, not just as an economy, how Indians have done well on the global stage and in many, many fields, and how we have managed ourselves despite the extraordinary diversity, despite the extraordinary dissent within the nation. We are still a democracy, and we just, the elephant is the animal that everybody, India is represented as. But so what? The elephant just keeps moving forward and very strong, very wise. And therefore, coming back to your question, I think from a practical perspective, yes, it gives us market share. It's 13-14% plus Vistara at 7-8% and AirAsia at 6-7%. Yes, it gives us market share, but that's not the only thing. That it's much more than that, and therefore it's going to be a great, difficult journey, but a great journey to bring pride back into that sovereign brand. Sometimes I think I told you about it. The other almost brand which is owned by the nation is Amul. I don't think any Indian would like to see Amul fail, and it's not just because of the butter or the icon. It is also about the way they have gone about doing business. The cooperative model and exceptional. So I think all the discussions of the previous panel to some extent extends into this.
It resonates.
Yeah.
So you're saying Air India is now going to be a sovereign asset, only thing managed by the Tata Group?
Well, I think there's a lot of emotion attached, saying, it's come back to its original owner and all. I think those are emotions. To be fair, there is no capability yet in the group, except as we go forward, of that kind when we launched. So it's all new for us. But I think we can get people and skills and technology, etc., onto the table. But what sits in the consumer's mind is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about what we can get. Therefore, I mean, whether anybody else can do it, of course, but I think we can do it better than most others.
I wouldn't doubt it. So I want to go back to Titan for 5 minutes, Bhaskar. Yeah. So, this business has changed. I think the humility regarding the market cap notwithstanding, the business has changed dramatically under your watch. And I don't know if it's an intended pun or not, but yes, it did. I remember one meeting, I don't know if you recall this meeting, where we were in the room and we were showing the value of the brand and the value of the intangibles as against the fixed assets. So there was a 210 crore factory, which was a very large and state-of-the-art manufacturing facility you had. And I had the gumption to say in that meeting that the fixed assets are reasonably irrelevant compared to the intangible assets. And I remember that the head of manufacturing lost his temper completely with me. I don't know if you remember that meeting. And I had to retract very quickly. Now, the reality is that the resurrection of Titan and the status it has achieved today in the Pantheon of Indian industry has been significantly, you would agree, due to the fact that the brand was nurtured and the brand was given meaning and purpose with a lot of people as an orchestra putting their might behind it with your leadership. So what is your view on what the brand and in fact the other aspects of design and IP did to take to Titan to where it is today?
I wish we could fight on the Zoom call. I still agree with Mr. Hari Rao, who was the one who I think lost his temper or whatever. Let me start. It's a logical build-up because I am an engineer at heart and by training. So look, the Titan brand did not exist till the factory made the watch. Okay, let us accept that. Tanishq did not exist till a spanking new manufacturing facility with the best people that the company could hire, put together and design beautiful jewelry. So, the basics, at least in our business, where you are talking, where you're talking not just timekeeping, you're talking adornment beyond just timekeeping. And it is true in India. I don't know globally, where I think somebody spoke about Starbucks and the experience markets and even fashion and so on. The basics that the consumer looks for in a category, if you cannot live up to that, forget the cannot, you have to live up to that and keep at it, improving it all the time. And a brand loses it if it cannot keep that up. Now, whether you own those factories, I think you spoke about 210 crores of assets deployed by the company versus you still have to make a watch, Ramesh. So I think I therefore go back to, and this is where Titan has done it wonderfully well, and I think the group does it very well. Many brands have exploited the vendor to be able to deliver exceptional profits and whatever quality, etc., to the consumer. Now, the consumer has appreciated the quality of the product, whether it's a Guess watch or a Tesla car or a Apple iPhone or a Samsung phone, therefore, and the technology that Samsung owns, the IP that Samsung owns and the brand that it owns, etc. But what is behind making that product? You need the Foxcons of the world, yes, but the manner in which Apple has dealt with Foxconn is what the previous group was talking about. I think the wholesomeness of a brand is sitting there and consumers see that. And to me, and that was, I think, the magic. We were able to weave within one. The recruitment in Hosur was of villagers who had not seen what a factory was and teaching them watchmaking. So when they make the watch, you've been to the factory, when they make the watch or when they make a piece of jewelry, they are told, look, this will sell, it could sell in Bombay, it could sell in Dubai, it could sell in Europe, at least when we were selling in Europe. So the pride is an important part, pride of the work, pride. And we had made statements like one of our HR policies early when we were not making the kind of money we were making was to improve the quality of life in the community around where we were having our plants. And we continue to do that 35 years later. We go to the hills in Uttarakhand and recruit girls there. So I think the ethos and the culture of everybody thinks we are customer centric. Yes, we are customer centric, but there is a wholesomeness to the company which is beyond just marketing and brand and EBITDA margin and return on capital employed. That is felt only when you are inside a company. You know, somebody talked about my going to the wedding. You said about my going to the wedding of a business partner's daughter or son in Guntur or Lucknow, etc. That is me. That is a different matter. But for me, those market visits counted for two reasons. One is ear to the ground. The other is that this is the way we are, to demonstrate to your sales force that I want to talk to you guys how things are in the marketplace and understand what is happening in the marketplace. So I think it's a whole culture that today people practice that, and it started with my predecessor Xerxes Desai, who was the founder of the company, and we just added more and more and more to that and just emphasized it. And then, of course, the market, I go back to the market, to BSE, etc. I think they are still confused. They don't know whether Titan is a marketing company, Titan is a manufacturing company, whether Titan is a retailer, whether Titan is a brand owner, whether Titan is a jeweler, whether Titan is a watchmaker. We are all of that put together and more. And therefore, re-rating happened when somebody said they are a retailer and they are not a manufacturer. So retail was the sunrise industry at that time. So we got re-rated. And then somebody said jewelry is a 250,000 crore market and they're only 5% market share. So therefore, there's great future. So market cap, yeah, sure, it is one indicator. But I think customer affection and affection of all our stakeholders is what measures for me. And if I were to go by Raymond's, new age brand assessment, I would probably begin to, add affection of all your stakeholders.
That's the whole point. I'm saying you started by saying you wanted to fight with me, but you did outline very clearly the role of the connection and engagement with all your stakeholders and the value systems that were practiced as a group, not just as an individual leader. Yeah. Which is a great segue into my next question. In an increasingly transparent world, value has become a magnified marker of how we regard a business entity today. Okay. Even the saving the planet, ESG, all of that. The Tatas have demonstrated it as a matter of course over the last 1.5 centuries. Do you see greater appreciation of this aspect? A company like Patagonia, for example, that we all admire for this, or just greater compliance? ESG definitely is coming there. Or is it going to be just more lip service? What do you think this intangible asset is going to drive?
I don't think it is going to be in the hands of the companies. I think in this highly connected world and highly informed world, and I really aligned with what Raymond spoke about in the previous panel, I think more and more communities, consumers, other business partners are going to demand from corporations a certain kind of behavior, and that there will be no choice. It is not going to be merely regulation, Yes, regulation we will put it all in our annual reports and, have these great ESG initiatives, etc., etc. But where the rubber hits the road will be when that consumer or that employee, I mean, you see what's happened to Facebook, whistleblowers and so on and so forth. That's not good. That's just not good. And those kinds of pressures will build, I believe. So you cannot just get away with lip service. And it's their own making in a way. Facebook has connected the whole world, and that Now they're paying for it because everybody comes to know. So reform will happen not only because of regulation.
So you're saying it's no longer going to be nice to have voluntary or even compliance. It's going to be what the market will force you to do.
It will be, because, I mean, we know it because the young are going to define that. The younger lot are certainly more purpose driven and looking for purposeful companies, purposeful brands. And it'll actually be, it's not just about compliance. You know, if you're non-compliant, you're dead. I mean, but it will be about what more. How much more have you done for the planet? How much more have you done for your people? How much more have you done for community? And people will discover in this day and age, and it's not that it'll happen overnight, but it'll rise in such a way, and then there'll be a tipping point, you know, for every company. If you don't take care of it, it will be a problem. I mean, it'll start with packaging in the store to the kind of service. So the intangibles are no longer about the moment of truth at the store. Yes, that is about the experience of buying and how much knowledge that girl has, etc. It's gone beyond that.
So I don't want to make unfavorable comparisons. It's not right in a public forum. But do you think that someone like Tata today will then become a shining example of what good companies should be as a group? Without any bias, can you speak about it as an industry leader?
I think, yes, it's already, I mean, and the previous panel, it came up, the name itself, the group's name. It is a beacon, but we too have some way to go. I think companies have some way to go. Tata Steel is working hard on its carbon footprint. Tata Chemicals is doing something. Tata Power, for example, is transforming itself with renewables. So is Tata Motors. But those are business calls. The manner in which the Tata Group dealt with COVID, for example, I'm not talking with the external. Yes, external, that 1,500 crores is a separate matter. I'm talking about the message within the group about employees and associates being taken care of during the COVID period in unexceptionable. That is, you have to. And I'm not saying only the Tata Group. I think many large groups respected that. But Tata, being Tata, it is talked about. And therefore, in every act of the group, people will see. I think acquisition of Air India again has been seen as the right thing for the group to do, or the right by the nation, right by the group, and so on and so forth. So, yes, I think it is, we have some way to go, but I think we are up there in front, leading the way.
We are all very proud of it. I just want to shift a little bit tracks, Bhaskar, this whole business of B2B versus B2C. When you speak of intangibles, especially in the context of brands, the conversation tends to veer very quickly to B2C businesses. But the reality is that 2/3 of the world economy or more is B2B economy. Okay. Do you believe that these assets have any less of an impact in business to business as we see them very starkly in B2C?
No, I think it's a mistake. I think there are corporate brands, and then there are product brands. If I were to just be very simplistic as a marketer, and if I were to take, let me take the example of Apple. Okay, I mean, it's actually 3-tiered, according to me. Okay, I mean, there are experts, I'm sure, in this audience as well as others. We call Apple is one of the biggest brands in the world, right? 2.86 trillion market cap, the company, etc. But a lot of people believe that it's the intangible. But Apple's hardware and software is exceptional experience, right? The UI, UX, and the design. I mean, the design is not just pretty. It is exceptionally usable, friendly. I'm not an Apple user, incidentally, but I appreciate it from far for various reasons. Leave that aside. But therefore, when you say brick and mortar and corporate brand and product brand, I think this brand now what they do in their, their values and their treatment of their employees or their suppliers, I'm not aware of. But if you were to take a big corporate brand like an IBM or a TCS or General Electric, GE, these are the big corporate brands and those are the big businesses. I think they have their place in history and current, because they represent, if you were to take again the example of Paul Polman and Unilever, it's a beautiful example of product as well as corporate. The corporate values has not been talked about. I don't think whether the India CEO or the global CEO talks too much about it, but it is felt. And therefore, every product of Unilever is, when it's bought, there is somewhere at the back of the mind that this is a responsible company. This is a company which treats its people well and so on. So, whereas there are companies which don't have that, an Infosys or a TCS doesn't have a consumer connect, but it is known how they behave in society. Have they, like, I don't like this word giving back to society. It means you have plundered first and then you're giving back, So they have been giving. The Tata Group has been giving from day one. In Titan, we've been giving irrespective of whether we made money or not. We have done the right by the community in which we were operating. Therefore, corporate brands are, I'm not saying it is in the same axis, if you were to ask me. It's a different axis and you need them. They don't have consumer products. If you were to take TVS, for example, TVS has motorbikes and TVS motors, but TVS has started, as a, I think as a transport operator in Tamil Nadu. But the respect that it has in Tamil Nadu and in the country is not only because of the motorcycles that it makes, no. Therefore, it is the corporate brand is extendable to products because of the manner in which they conducted their business. I think the best example is Tata.
Yeah. So when you're saying corporate, you are referring to B2B. When you said TCS, Infosys,
B2B,
who don't have B2C businesses as such.
Correct. Or GE for that matter.
GE, yes, absolutely. They've built absolutely powerful brands. So you're saying it's as relevant and it should be as looked at with the same, let me say, lens as a B2C company would have.
No, this is where you have to take this Raymond's advice. That is all brand evaluation, or let us say valuation of an enterprise. Let's call it an enterprise or an institution, has to be a 360-degree evaluation, whether it is a GE or a Tata or a Infosys or Lifebuoy and Tanishq, Yes, these are consumers. Consumers have bought the brand, but how the product was made, how it has treated its people, how associates what associates say about this company and the company which made this brand, all that. So there is a child, father, grandfather. I mean, there are three. If I were to take a brand like Fast Track, Fast Track has Fast Track, then there is the Titan company, and then the grandfather, which is Tata. All of them, the lineage is what makes it all up, and how all of them have kind of behaved somewhere affects the brand, and therefore the same applies. If a company in the Tata group lets that group down, it is going to affect the Tata brand, isn't it?
Absolutely.
On values, and so it is a coexistence, but some of the use of the corporate versus the use of the product brand are in two different contexts.
Correct. So I hear you saying that if you look at a 360-degree view, then you get a much more refined, let me say, sense of the comparison between a B2B and a B2C. Because a lot of we will provide the branding elements of B2B, even if it's not facing the consumer on a one-to-one basis like it does for a B2C. Got that. Thank you. My last question is really what advice that you would give. Finally, the whole issue of family business, I want to talk about. Now, while most league tables have shiny MNC brands, we know today that more than 70% of the world's GDP is generated by family businesses. That means family-run businesses. Okay. Now, what advice do you have for these people with respect to recognizing and driving intangibles for the creation of value as a whole?
Well, I thought about this question. Value as a whole for themselves, right?
No, in totality, what we were discussing all evening.
So Ramesh, the few family businesses or families that I know, they are very below the radar. Okay, they have made some choices, and those strong choices are value-driven, values-driven, and it is about that they would like to conduct business in a certain way, and therefore to them the intangibles, they are all aware. They are seeing the rest of the world like, if you were to take an example of a small privately owned hotel chain, let us take that. They would know how to run the hotel. They would probably learn from the Tajes and the Oberois of the world what better they do. But they would limit themselves to the ambition of the family and not go public to become much bigger and much richer. Okay, I know for sure, because for them, Patek Philippe, for example, is an extremely good example. They have stuck to the knitting of making exceptionally high quality watches, mechanical watches, for generations. Generations. They are not in the same league as the Swatch Group, right? Swatch Group is publicly listed. Swatch Group is under the pressure of the stock market to perform quarter on quarter. Whereas Patek Philippe says, I will produce one watch less this year, and give you 18 months later, and there's a queue outside. I'm not saying that's also good. Now, that is by today's standards, people would say, what nonsense is this? Might as well, they should have expanded, etc. But they made a choice. They made a choice. So family businesses know, I believe they know. I know quite a few who have said, no, we just want to learn from large businesses how they run their businesses efficiently. And but we know what our customers want, and we'll limit our universe to this universe, whatever they are operating. I don't know whether that answers your question, but I don't know too much about other family businesses. MSMEs, for example, if I were to take MSMEs, they are happy doing what they're doing, but they want to excel. They want to excel at what they're doing, not just make big amounts of money. I know an MSME last week, he was recognized in Bangalore. His objective is to employ large numbers of poor people from rural India, rural Karnataka. He takes so much happiness. He gets so much happiness out of saying, look, I've got 700-800 people I have employed, and during COVID, I supported them. Thanks to Titan, I got orders. Okay. Of course, he thanked Titan, but it's a very different, I'm not saying good or bad, but it's a very different approach. And it's a totally family business.
So I hear you saying that these people may not be structuring it or articulating it like this panel might.
Exactly.
But they intuitively believe in it and they live it every day.
Correct. No, and they're very, very smart at learning from big business. See, the one thing that big businesses are bad at is learning from others. We sit on a high horse. We are very proud of what we do. We are critical of what somebody else does. We are not curious. And whereas these guys are perennially humble, and they want to send that, look, I don't want to be disparaging. Every Gujarati businessman will send his son to a Titan or a Unilever or an ITC for 5 years. सीख के आओ वहां क्या करते हैं, उसके बाद इधर उसको अप्लाई करो.
Okay, one question from the audience to Mr. Bhatt. For Air India to revitalize the brand, should it not start with the people culture? Given that people would be creating and delivering the brand, as it were, and given the airline is predominantly an experience business.
Very good question. So I will share with you what we learned in Titan, and it's a coincidence, which is the very person who lost his temper at RJT came from HMT. And I think these people in Air India, given the right environment of trust, transparency, and empowerment, will outperform anybody, any of their peers. I think we have to be cognizant of that. You're absolutely right. This business is about service and experience. But on the people side, I think we have been very unkind to them in public media. I mean, I know, they are overweight and they are whatever, those are the very uncharitable comments, but it's okay. I guess customers are finally right, but to set it right is going to be not by the American way of firing and hiring. It will have to be inspiring.
Beautiful note to close on. Guys, for all the people in the audience, I think we've had an exceptional session. As usual, classic Mr. Bhatt, completely grounded, totally deep, and with a new perspective each time. Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you all. All the best, EQUITOR and everyone.
Thanks very much. Over to you, Tarun.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. Mr. Bhatt, thank you, RJT, for those fascinating insights. On the topic of intangibles as force multipliers, I think I can only do justice to the panel that you heard right now by not merely repeating the words that were shared, but by inviting all of our audience members to pay a little closer attention to the choice of words that were used during the session. HR improving the quality of life of a person rather than an employee. Measure of a company is now customer affection rather than customer acquisition, and how market value is a consequence rather than a goal. The simple fact that these underpinning commonalities exist within some of the largest companies in the world, like multiple examples were shared earlier, and the fact that there are several entities inside of this country and very well inside this conversation as well, that hold these qualities inside of them, but they're just not aware of the potential that they reach. We will revisit that thought at the end of this session. I would now like to introduce our esteemed speakers for our final panel. Sharing his insights on the theme of brands as central organizing principle for business is Mr. Harish Bhatt. Having joined the Tata Group in 1987 in the Tata Administrative Services, Mr. Bhatt today is responsible for India's most valuable brand. He has also been a director on boards of several Tata companies such as Trent, Tata Starbucks, Tata Unistore, to name a few. During his stint of 3 decades with the Tata Group, Mr. Bhatt has held several senior positions and has played a key role in the launch and nurturing of many iconic brands such as Titan, Fastrack, Tanishq, and Tata Tea. He has also played a role in the turnaround of the jewelry business and in the milestone acquisition of Tetley. Selected as the top voices of India in 2019 by LinkedIn, Mr. Bhatt is also a prolific writer with various national newspapers such as The Hindu, Business Line, and Mint. He has 4 published books to his credit, including the newly launched Tata Stories, which he shares snippets on LinkedIn. I'm a very avid follower. I would indulge the audience members to take a look at it, which narrates 40 timeless tales from the Tata Group. His book is a sequel to the national bestseller Tata Log. Welcome, Mr. Bhatt.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction, and look forward to participating in the panel today. Thanks a lot.
Joining Mr. Bhatt is Ms. Pervin, the iconic force behind CRY, She shared her career in advertising. She started her career in advertising while working with Lentus India for 3 years before moving to CRY in 1990. She worked with CRY in various capacities until she took over as the CEO from 1998 to 2004. Since then, she has been a consultant within the development sector, working with various NGOs. From 2010 to 12, she worked with Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai on a project led by Dr. Monica Sharma. All of us know her as the author and creator of Radical Transformation in Leadership, RTL. Since 2012, she has been conducting a weekly music session with senior citizens at the Holy Spirit Home in Bangalore. Their choir, called the Choir of Loaves and Fish, has performed 17 public concerts over 9 years, both in the home and venues near the home. Irwin serves as a trustee on the board of CRY, Dream a Dream, Pratham Books, Lighthouse Communities Foundation, and Citizens for Peace. Welcome, Pawan.
Thank you so much for having me.
And joining the conversation all the way from the Maldives is Dr. Abdullah Mausum, Minister for Tourism, Maldives. Born in the island of Kela, Maldives, Dr. Mausum started his tourism career in 1985 as the administrative officer at the Department of Tourism. Dr. Mausum holds a doctorate degree in sustainable tourism development conferred by the School of Public Policy, University of Birmingham, United Kingdom. From February 2019 to August 2020, Minister Mausum served in the Diplomatic Corps of Maldives. He was the High Commissioner of the Republic of Maldives to the Republic of Singapore and the non-resident High Commissioner to New Zealand and designated non-resident High Commissioner to Australia. Minister Mausum has worked as a tourism consultant for over 25 years and was involved in the development of the pivotal third tourism master plan of Maldives. He was the lead author of the Maldives Ministry of Tourism's publication, 35 Years of Tourism. Welcome, Mr. Mausum.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And moderating the session for us is Ms. Ekta, CEO, EQUITOR Value Advisory. Ekta oversees the overall operations at EQUITOR. Previously, she has worked in banking operations and consulting, where she managed high expectations from clients across the globe. With a minute eye for detail and natural inclination towards method and order, she leads a team of highly motivated commanders. If she wasn't at EQUITOR, one might even see her as a classical singer performing on the stage. Welcome, Ekta.
Thank you.
I would now request Ekta to deliberate on the topic of brands as the central organizing principle for business with our panel members. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tarun. It is indeed a very big to be sharing the panel with you. To give all of you and our audience a context, let me give a brief idea about what the panel is all about. So we have usually seen and heard from our experiences that many organizations build strategies, create plans, structures, and processes, and then think about brand like an icing on the top. And therefore, like I mentioned in the first panel, it goes back to the marketing department to take care of it. But powerful brands make sure that they start from the brand, define the higher purpose, like Mr. Richard Reiki mentioned, and build outwards. So this panel, having a representation from the three of you from very different but powerful brands, we want to hear about how important it is to define what the brand stands for and to put it at the center of everything that you do as an organization or even as a country. So let's start from you, Mr. Bhatt. The Tata brand today is valued at $21 billion, right? It is perhaps the biggest global brand we have. All of us have heard so many stories about the Tatas around the area of compassion, conscience, or courage, including some that were mentioned in the previous panels, and the latest one being the Air India story. As a brand custodian of this 150 years old legacy, can you tell us with a couple of stories what the Tata brand stands for?
So Ekta, thank you. It's a pleasure and privilege to speak in this panel. I want to just begin by congratulating EQUITOR on 20 glorious years. I have had the opportunity to interact with RJT, Ramesh, during my stint in Titan, as well as very recently during my stint in Tata Sons as well. And I know the fascinating work that all of you do at EQUITOR. So firstly, heartiest congratulations. It's also a privilege to follow the fascinating discussion which was held with Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt just now. Bhaskar was my boss in Titan for many years. And a lot of what I have learned in marketing in the brand space was actually learned from him. So, the Tata brand is a fascinating brand. You asked for a couple of stories. So let me narrate the stories first, and then let me talk about what the idea of the brand is. Okay. I want to go back to I'll come to some contemporary stories later, but let me go back to the very first story. How many of you know that the first industrial enterprise founded by the Tata Group was founded in the 1870s by our founder, Jamshedji Tata? It was called the Empress Mills in Nagpur. And it became a very profitable enterprise. Within a few years, it returned to its shareholders more than 20 times their capital within a few years. And he used the latest innovations, the ring spindle from the UK, which even the UK mills were not using. He's located the mill in Nagpur, which was the center of the cotton industry. He built a lot of depth of expertise on cotton and the category. And he made brilliant textiles. It was perhaps the most profitable mill in India at that time. But he did something else, which represents the ethos of the Tata brand. In 1887, he established a pension fund for workers, the first of its kind in the country. In 1895, he introduced accident compensation for the workers. In 1901, he introduced a provident fund scheme for his workers. And a few years later, by the 1920s, Empress Mills had creches for the children of the working women. This is more than 100 years back that I'm talking about. So many people asked, why is he spending so much money on employee welfare? Doesn't this wealth belong only to the shareholders? And I had the privilege recently of reading the only published speech of Jamshedji Tata, which he made in 1895. And look at what he says. People asked him, why do you do all this? And in the speech, he responds, and these are beautiful words. He says, we do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than other people. But we think we started on sound and straightforward business principles. Considering the interests of our shareholders our own, and the health and welfare of our employees and the community, the sure foundation of our prosperity. So look at what he says. He says the interests of our shareholders is certainly very important. They are like our own interests. But at the same time, the welfare of our employees and the community is at the center of what we would like to do. And what I'm delighted about is that philosophy that our founders set forth more than 130 years ago is what the Tata Group is living with even today. You heard Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt speak about how Titan has created employment for people from rural Tamil Nadu, or the work that Tanishq is doing for karigars in the jewelry industry today. It's the same story of being dedicated to the community through the work that you're doing. So that's one story that I want to narrate of how the community has been and will always continue to be center stage for the Tata Group. The second is that the Tata Group has, I think, always looked at industries which are important to the nation and which the nation can be, will benefit from in the future, and which the nation can be proud of. Right from Tata Steel, which was established because Jamshedji Tata wanted India to have its own steel and not import it. And I can talk about Tata Airlines, which is now Air India, which was founded because JRD Tata thought civil aviation was very critical for the development of the country, or the trucks business by Tata Motors in the 1950s, or for instance, the Tata Consultancy Services, India's first IT services company in the 1960s, or you take branded iodized salt in the 1980s, or you take Tanishq in the 1990s, or you come along the entire, or you take Tata Digital, which is setting up a new digital venture today to create a digital ecosystem across the country. So I think the Tata Group has been committed to the concept of nation building through its businesses. And that has also remained consistent through all these. So the story I want to narrate here is actually the story of Tata Indica. In the 1990s, Mr. Ratan Tata stood up and said, let's make India's first indigenous car where all the parts and the accessories are also made in India. Many naysayers said it cannot happen. And he actually asked industry to join him in creating this first indigenous car. But because of the naysayers, he said, if people are not willing to join, let me go ahead and do it in telco, in Tata Motors. And he went ahead. He actually got his engineers in the ERC in Tata Motors, Engineering Research Center in Tata Motors in Pune to design the Tata Indica along with idea of Turin. Then he got, local accessory and part makers established in the Pune area and the western belt of India to supply the car. He could not, at that time, Telco could not afford to buy a new car plant because it would cost billions of dollars. His engineers and Mr. Tata scoured the world around. They found a disused Nissan plant in Australia, bought it at 1/5 to 1/6 the price that a new car plant would cost, disassembled it brick by brick and brought it to Pune, where the Tata Indica plant was set up. And that, I've spoken to workers who created the first Tata Indica. They cry with joy even today when they think about it, because they have contributed to the building of India's first indigenous car. It went through some quality issues. Those were rectified. And by 2001, 2002, Tata Indica V2 was the fastest selling car in this country. And that is the organization that Bhaskar referred to earlier, which is shifting to renewables now, electric vehicles, where it's already the market leader. And a fascinating range from the Nexon to the Punch to everything else that you see in the Tata Motors portfolio. So these two examples, whether it is Empress Mills in the 1890s, or whether it's Tata Indica now, or all the other businesses I've talked about earlier, are examples of either doing well for the community or doing well for nation building. And of course, the Tata brand stands for excellence. I could not agree more with Bhaskar when he said that eventually, the quality of products and services, the hygiene values that your consumer seeks from your product, if those do not exist, then a good brand and a trusted brand will not exist. So if you take community, if you take pioneering for the nation, and if you take this concept of business excellence, doing business right, providing all stakeholders the best value of products and services, those ideas of the Tata brand have remained unchanged for 150 years, which is why I think the brand continues to flourish. So thank you, Ekta, for asking that question. And sorry if this was a little bit of a long-winded answer.
I think these are stories we want to keep hearing, and we can keep hearing for the next of the session. Minister Mausam, if I could ask you, I was reading somewhere that the Maldives brand has became the destination that we know today in the last 15 years, right? I remember RGT used to tell us that when you land in Maldives, you see one aircraft and 50 private jets. So from a fisherman island to a tropical hotspot, from no foreign investment to a place filled with private resorts and private jets today, how have you built this nation brand, and what does the brand stand for today?
Thank you very much, Ekta, and thank you very much, other panelists. I also wish to convey my appreciation, congratulations to EQUITOR, and of course, Ramesh, Jude Thomas, RJT, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this interesting panel. I think you're right. We started very slow in 1972. Next year, we are celebrating 50 years golden era. And last year, Maldives won the world's leading destination award by World Travel Awards. And again, this year, we have won world's leading destination award. We wanted to be the leader. First, of course, when the luxury travel hit, Maldives was the ideal destination. Ideal in the sense, if you read a storybook or if you look at the postcards, say there are postcards that depicts holiday, tropical holiday, and Maldives have the perfect this one. And we had a theme destination, the brand tagline, sunny side of life, that is very much Latin oriented, fun, relaxation, enjoyment, everything. So that is there. And around 2005, we knew that traditional Maldives has to move away and to be at the edge of the product. We invited the international brands so that Maldives would become more popular. Though there was the time first, the standard charters were there, operated by giant tour operators who had the total vertical integration of the whole product, from the taking the hotel rooms all the way to having their own airline and distribution system. But so we allowed 100% foreign direct investment, and that also we didn't have tax at that time. So companies were very easy. They were very happy they could get a total investment return within 5 to 7 years. So that made everybody wanting to come here and developing a hotel. And while developing the hotel, they focused on new things. The Maldives was hot, but they want to be the hot property in the Maldives. So they came up with new things, and the new brands that came to the Maldives made Maldives stronger. International known brands. From India, we had Taj, of course, that came here. From Italy, we had Rio. From different parts, different brands came, international chains came. And with regard to diverse, we knew we had to, traditionally it is diving market from Italy, then we started having honeymooners. And first, all the Maldives island resorts, they had island resort as the name. Then, in the early 2000s, the spa concept started kicking off, and all the islands took the surname resort and spa. So Maldives became a wellness destination. Then we knew that there are other niche areas. So while we had Maldives sunny side of life, we created 4 sub-brands. The Maldives romantic side of life for the honeymooning sector, Maldives thrilling side of life for adventure tourism, and Maldives colorful side of life for the diving market, underwater market, and the spiritual side of life for the wellness tourism. So these were our brands we had, and we wanted to make sure that Maldives is really affordable for everybody. But unfortunately, because when you develop an upmarket resort, you get returns so quickly. That's not happening. Eventually, what has happened is that's why these private jets happen to be. So we have got a lot of rooms for private jets, a lot of rooms for first class seats, a lot of rooms for business class seats, but not enough rooms for economy class seats. That's why presently our new tourism diversification plan is taking tourism to the islands. We have already started small hotels in the inhabited islands. About 20% of the beds are mid-market. In January, we are expanding it to homestay. So that will make Maldives very affordable to even college students. And also it will give a room for the new tourists to be engaged, because the new tourists want the destination story. And catching on the MICE market also, we have redefined our MICE product as opposed to the traditional concept of going to a meeting room. Doing a meeting under a hut or a cabana is perfectly fine. Having your shoes off and having your feet on the white sands and having the meeting is going to be more productive. So this is the new dimension we are taking. One thing we are very careful though is, especially after the pandemic, the main reason why we were able to revive so quickly is because of the geographic nature and because of the one island, one resort concept that Maldives is very famous and popular for. So we are ensuring that one island, one resort concept stays intact, but we have got new models of resorts now. Integrated tourism projects are coming. We want to make sure that Maldives has got something for everyone, because every drop counts. And our focus is on what the traveler wants. What does he want? Does he want this and that? Only a market that we are not going is the casino market. Everything else we want Maldives to be a brand that can be associated with all the other market segments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Last but not the least, Pervin, moving on to you. Many of us know that your journey has been very different from the experiences that we have heard so far. When you took over Cry, almost overnight, it was not the brand that we know today, right? The not-for-profit sector was not as structured as it is today. So what were some of the founding principles of Cry which helped you believe in the brand and then define the brand eventually?
Thank you, Ekta, and thank you, Ramesh. And like everybody else, to just wish EQUITOR all the very best for the next gazillion years that you're going to be here doing brand valuation. Yeah, so I think, Cry started in 1979, right? And we forget now, in the context of the development sector and how it is structured today, we forget that in 1979, India was pretty much the Africa of the world, where funding was pouring into India. And nobody was really raising resources in India. And into that universe came Rupan Kapoor, who was just 25 years old, and he was an airline purser actually with Air India. So it's interesting that these names have been coming up today. And he started what was not the Rupan Kapoor Foundation and what was Cry, in a sense, Child Relief, now Child Rights Anew. And I think at the heart of it really for Cry, and the reason I do believe that Cry is what it is today, is because he did that. He set up the organization Cry, and everything that we are is pretty much embodied in the name. Child, now Rights, and you. And Cry, the organization, is really the and. And he set it up in a sense as a space, as a platform, as an institution. And remember, when he set it up with 50 rupees, right? But he had a vision. He had a large vision, much, much bigger than anyone could have imagined. And it was really, Cry was set up as an invitation, as an invitation to people to come in and offer of themselves the best that they had, their gifts, their talents, their resources, in a way that could be brought together and harnessed really to ensure the transformation of the lives of children. And I think because he started it as an organization that was Child Rights, a Child Relief Anew, and because he set the mission at the heart of everything that we did, that pretty much drove everything that we did subsequently. So much of who Rupan was got woven into the very organization itself, into the DNA of the organization. So whether it was the belief that nothing is impossible, that every obstacle that comes our way is just an opportunity to do something different, whether it was the belief that Indian children are an Indian responsibility, whether it was the belief that India was rich in resources, we just had to figure out how to harness those resources and transform those resources for children's rights. All of that was very much woven into the DNA of the organization. I came in 1990 at a time when, again, actually, so much of what Rupan did was just so radical and bold, because in 1989, he started to look at moving Cry from being a volunteer-led organization, and basically people who had come in and volunteered their time, to actually building an institution, building an organization. And in fact, again, the connections are so interesting, because one of our first professional appointees actually was the executive assistant to Mr. Ratan Tata, Indira Rajadaksh. And she came in actually, and she was the one who took Rupan's this vision that he had of building an organization, and she translated it actually into almost like brick and mortar and systems and processes and ways in which to bring in professionals. You remember in 1989, there was like a firewall, almost like the Great Wall of China, between the development sector and the corporate sector. And Cry in many ways was pioneered that coming together and bringing people from these different sectors into the organization. And people who came in really, they were earning probably 3,000 rupees a month, and let me say that these were not just people who could afford to be in Cry. Very often the people who were there were people who were supporting their entire families on those salaries. So it was something about being moved very deeply by a mission that was larger than yourself, that brought us all together in that organization. I always call it was like a little microcosm at that time when I joined CRY, because you had everything from, people who were there, in inverted commas, the jolawalas outside there in the field, to people coming in from the corporate sector, to artists, to designers, to finance people, to technology. And the weaving together of that and the bringing together of that was really that mission that we had, which was to transform the lives of children, to enable them to realize their full potential, and to create the space in which people could come in and realize their potential as change makers.
Right. Thank you. I think fascinating. I think from all your points of view, it has been established that it's important to define what a brand stands for, right? Whether it's with the founders or 150 years legacy or with the country. We understand that, but it is equally important to live what we stand for on a daily basis, right? So if all of you could tell us how each one of you have managed to do that or have seen that happening in your respective organizations or entities. Minister Mosum, if we could start from you, and if you could share some experiences of how an entire country has lived what the Maldives brand has stand for.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we have the choice to be very stubborn and say, okay, we are a brand, we are here, and we should keep our brand and let people change and be following our brand. I think that could be perhaps wrong and perhaps need a rethink on it. We need to change the attributes of the brand totally to match the needs, the expectations, the feeling of your guests, your customers. The world, as discussed in previous panels, environment is something that is really we have to look into, especially for tourism. That's our resource base. Even now, it has got a quality tag on it. It has got a global ethics responsible tag on it. Same goes with human resource. So these are, I think, new age business practices, corporate responsibilities that organizations have to practice. Also let the customers know that they are doing it. This is going to eat up on profit a bit, but I think in the long run, it will be important. At the tourism ministry, we have some regulations, very good sound regulations for environment management and human resource. But I always tell the tourism industry is, as far as environment is concerned, it's a self-regulatory industry. And for human resource also, because you need the top of the notch smiling workforce to get happiness to the guests. For Maldives, one thing that we are very much focusing on repeat business. That is one reason why we are able to revive when there is a shock. Just like any other business, you want them to come back. And that's why Maldives, we launched our first loyalty program, destination loyalty program. Maldives Border Miles is the first one that is there. And we go to the extent of, recognizing individual guests who come to Maldives who have no affiliation with government, but when an organization tells us that they have a guest who had been in the Maldives for 30, 40 years, we go and greet them and make them feel good. And that message goes out loud. Regulations will be there, global regulations. Recently, we have introduced minimum wage. Then there is the service charge component. Those are small things, but I think the ethical dimension is taking a very strong hold. And for us, changing the brand, many people, we go to some resort and say, we want to keep the resort as it is, the old Maldives, without any change. But that is very good for some, but others want new change. And today, ministry, we brand ministry as the facilitation ministry, and we say the developers' creativity is the limit, except for environmental limitations and safety and security limitations. So we want Maldives to be made stronger by the investors. And they have research teams, they have people who will be able to study and find what are the small niche markets out there. So I think the key is being able to change. We need to change. Otherwise, the brand will be, I think, out of fashion. And another thing I think we have to consider is we are living in a global competition. As a destination, perhaps people will not be able to buy Maldives. But I know that there are products that are trying to copy Maldives. You can have the physical product, but you can't copy the service. With companies, I think what's happening is when there is a threat, they always buy it up. Yeah. There are mergers. And I think that's where some brands that have the potential to be very strong gets eaten up by a brand. And the big brands we see today are small ones that has grown up, and they are so big, they don't want to give chance for another small brand to become very big and tarnish the brand image of the big one. So they just take the other one and bring it into their family and let it sleep for a while the main brand continues to grow. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Mr. Bhatt, coming to you. I mean, Tata is a huge organization, right? And like Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt mentioned, institution inside the organization. So how has this huge organization lived up to what the Tata brand has stood for in all these years? How do you make sure it happens on a daily basis?
So very relevant question, Ekta. So the Tata Group has more than 7 lakh employees across the world.
Right.
And, you have to ensure that the values of the brand permeate down to each of us who are part of the Tata Group. It's not, so therefore you need to put in place some institutional frameworks which make that happen. And let me describe 2 or 3 of those institutional frameworks. One is, I spoke about community being center stage to the brand, and I actually quoted what our founder said about it more than 130 years back. But every Tata Group company which has started since then, if you look at the work, let me just quote examples. If you look at the work that Tata Steel has done in Jamshedpur and more recently in Kalinganagar, or you look at what Bhaskar said, the work that Titan has done in Hosur in offering employment to a large number of people from the villages in Tamil Nadu. Or look at the work that Tata Motors has done in the Pimpri Chinchwad area of Pune. Actually, at the time they created the Pune plant, they also created an artificial lake for birds and for trees to ensure that greenery and cover is maintained. Or the work that Tata Chemicals does in Gujarat for tribal welfare, which has led to Rabdi tribal women developing a brand like Okai using the local handicrafts of Gujarat, or which has led to Tata Chemicals mounting a campaign to save the whale shark or to provide water to an arid region. So, every Tata Group company, therefore, I believe, sooner or later, understands the ethos of the brand and makes sure that while they try to build a very profitable, very successful business, they also give back what they can to the community. And of course, this is enshrined at the level of the Tata Group because 66% of the equity of our parent company, Tata Sons, is held by the Tata Charitable Trust. So 66% of the dividends go to the trust. Now, let me come to the second pillar of the brand. I spoke about community being center stage. Let's take building a business which is excellent and which does business on fair and ethical values. I spoke about business excellence being a core principle of the group. Every single company which uses the Tata brand, the companies are licensed to use the Tata brand, and every single company which uses the Tata brand has to sign up to 2 documents which become living documents for the company all the time. The first document that a company has to sign up, and all of us as employees of the company have to sign up, is a Tata Code of Conduct. It's a very well documented code. It's been in place for several years now, but recently it was refreshed, benchmarking some of the best codes in the world. And that code lays down the principles of behavior that each of us has to follow in our day-to-day life. And over my years in the Tata Group, I have seen that employees, for any reason, we are finally a human organization. And if there are any employees who violate the code, I think the Tata Group is very tough on us if we do it. I think they will not brook that violation. So that is one living document which each person signs up to. There are training programs around the Tata Code of Conduct, and it's drilled into all of us that the Code of Conduct is essential to our day-to-day behavior. The second document that we ensure, and that's what, I'm not saying that a code can cover every single person holistically. There will still be human beings who, and there will still be aberrations. And the code should be, we have a very good ethics organization within the Tata Group to address those aberrations, including a chief ethics officer for the Tata Group, chief ethics officers for each company, and so forth. So we have to be, not only have a code, but also have an ethics organization to address or to safeguard the code and institutionalize it and implement it. The second living document, EQUITOR, goes back to business excellence and creating products and services which are of excellent value and quality for our consumers. And we have a document called, we have a system called the Tata Business Excellence Model, where every company, no matter how large or how small it is,
right,
no matter how old or how new it is assessed under the Tata Business Excellence Model every year.
right.
It's assessed on the quality of its leadership, the quality of its strategy, the quality of its consumer connect, the quality of its HR and people management, the quality of its information technology and data, on the results that it produces. What this does, EQUITOR, is that each of us have to submit our respective companies to this assessment. And the assessment holds a mirror to us. It shows us what we are doing right on business excellence and what we can improve on. So that constant mirror that the Tata Business Excellence Model holds to each company of the group is yet another day-to-day method of ensuring that the value of the brand gets institutionalized.
Right.
Of course, we expect that over a period of time, those of us who work with the Tata Group for many years will imbibe this code, will imbibe those shall I say, principles of business excellence in everything that we do. But that happens with experience, and that happens also, with some passage of time. But these are the institutional day-to-day documents that form the basis. And unless a company implements the Tata Code of Conduct and is part of the Tata Business Excellence Model, they do not have a license to use the Tata brand. So those are some day-to-day principles that the Tata Group has put in place.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatt. Pavin, now moving on to you. So we know that you have understood the brand intuitively. That's what you spoke about, right? How have you ensured that when you were working in the organization, people internally got aligned to what CRY stood for? That intuition became more articulated.
Yeah, so I think that, like in so many ways, it's a bit like the British Constitution. For the longest time, it was not written down, because as long as Rupan was there, he lived it. And we looked to him for that kind of guidance, But we lost Rupan in 94, and the organization was just 15 years old at that point in time. We're now more than 40. And I think what became vital at that time for us was to ensure that which resided in Rupan and which he carried, we really took that out, and it became something that was held and shared across the organization, within each person. Each person was actually living it. I still remember, we had a memorial service after Rupan passed away, and I remember standing there, and I was doing the emceeing, and I remember feeling, oh my God, like the soul of the organization is gone, and how are we going to actually move forward? And 1 year later, we did a memorial service, just one. It was the only year we did a memorial service after he passed away. And I was again emceeing, and I remember just looking out at the organization, and there were, all our Bombay. It was that time it was in Bombay, and the employees were there. And I remember looking at everybody, and there was this energy, there was this passion, there was this commitment, and I realized, it hadn't gone anywhere. It was right there, alive, and today every single person was carrying that. And I think that was also because we laid emphasis. In fact, Pooja is here, who's now our CEO, and in that time she was in HR. She was our first. I mean, Pooja was the first HR person, I think, in the development sector in this country, because she came in at that time when no development organization had HR. But we recognize that people that are really the heart. For us, there's no other resource really. We don't have manufacturing, nothing. We just have people who carry the vision, and so it was we poured a lot of time and energy into what we called institution building, which was really about how do you carry the mission, how is there alignment around the mission, how is there alignment around the values, how are we living those values, not just in our HR and how we interact with each other, but how are the values of the organization translating into our very strategy, into the organizational strategy, into what we're doing at the grassroots level, into how we're building and what are the kind of relationships we're building with our partners, who are the ones who are actually reaching children. So we invested a lot in what we called institution building. And a lot of that was also doing deep internal work, inside out work, because we realized that transformation outside is only possible if you're willing to go through that transformation inside. So it is an inside out process. It is also understanding what it takes to change, what it takes to it's very easy to go out into the field to communities and say, you need to change, but we need to understand what it takes to actually change. So I think a lot of we invested a lot of time in that, in aligning, because people came from diverse backgrounds into CRY, and so it was important to find what was it that would hold us all together. And we realized it was those mission and values that really held us all together, that gave us that was the ground of our being, as it were, and that allowed us to, from there, be creative, from there, be innovative, from there, be bold, be courageous, and step out and do things that perhaps maybe we didn't think were possible, but really to be able to step out with that courage, you had to be anchored in the values. I remember many years after Rupan passed away, in fact, I went for a meeting we went to ICICI, and we were going to them for a big grant at that point, and we were meeting, I think it was Mr. Nachiket Moore. I think even Pooja was there at that meeting. And we were talking about what CRY had gone through and talking about the fact that Rupan was not there anymore. And the interesting thing is, I think if I were to poll most people in this on this conversation, most people might know CRY, but a lot of people will not know Rupan, And in many ways, looking back, I recognize what an extraordinary gift that was to us as an organization, that he didn't take that credit for himself. He didn't put any spotlight on himself. He just shone the spotlight on the mission, on the organization, on the work, on children. And when Mr. Moore looked at our annual report, and he said, I'm absolutely astonished, because I'm looking at 1994, when you lost your founder, when most, especially NGOs, are so centered around their founder. And he said, all I can see is, your trajectory is just going up. There's not even a blip there, So whatever happened to you happened internally. You all had to deal with the blow of losing your founder, but externally, you continue to do the work. And I believe that's because of how CRY got structured around its mission, and that everybody, no matter what had happened to us, the one thing we knew we had to continue, the one direction we had, it was so clear for us, that we had to continue to do what we had to do, because there was this huge, and there continues to be this huge need as far as children are concerned, And I think that, like, when I look back, we celebrated 40 years a couple of years ago, and it was so beautiful because we did the history of CRY. And what was amazing for people like myself, who I call, I'm like now a dinosaur in CRY, literally. But you see the young people, some of them who were just there in that gathering, had been just in CRY for 3 months and 4 months. And yet there's this intangible spirit that has continued over those 40 years, that it's still, you get it. It's the CRY spirit. I can't explain it with more clarity, more words, but there's a CRY spirit that still continues. You walk into a CRY office, and it's completely different. We're doing completely different things from even when I was in CRY full time. We're a different organization. Pooja and Vatsala, who are here, will tell you what we're doing. And yet there's something that you can recognize from its essence, which was there from the beginning, And I think that is that intangible essence of who we are and the values that are just lived and breathed and are transmitted, in that interaction, in that interface that happens on a regular basis. Yes, now we have things written down, and I think it's vital. I just heard Mr. Bhatt also talking about having those documents. I think it's vital to have certain things written down, available for everybody, and also not just written down, but experienced and lived, so that we know what those values, what does it mean when we say justice, equality, dignity, and integrity? What does that mean for us? So it's really important. But I think all of that only means something when it's lived and breathed. Yeah.
All right. I think just as a follow-up, you mentioned about people who are already in the system, how they have understood it and are now, exemplifying it in many ways, right? What about people who are not in the system? We have heard that it's very difficult to attract talent for the social sector sometimes. So how do you manage to do that by standing for what CRY has been defined over the years?
Yeah, I think it is. It's different. I think today is different because today the development sector is it's a much broader setup. There are organizations today that are paying very well, that are doing, they're philanthropic organizations now, they're foundations, etc. But organizations like CRY, it's still hard because, at the end of the day, at a very core level, we don't pay the kind of salaries, even within the development sector, that are there. But I think what has consistently over the years drawn people to CRY is, I always say this, we call we're a public trust, right? And I think I understood that to mean that we hold public resources in trust for children. And I think an article of faith for us from day one has been that in what we do, we have to ensure accountability, transparency. I mean, we would put out an annual report. Nobody even asked us to put out an annual report. We would put out our salaries. We would put out exactly how much money we have raised, exactly where that money is going, because we believe that we're holding resources in trust for children. We have to honor, first of all, our children. And I think, therefore, the work that we do and the fact that that work makes a difference. Two things people want to know. One is, can I make a difference actually in this large problem? And the second is, can I trust you? And if people know that, then I think that makes a difference. And the second thing, I think CRY has attracted people who came in, I think, especially from the corporate sector, a lot of people who came in from the corporate sector. I remember Ingrid, who's again another person from the advertising world, came in when she came into CRY. I remember her saying to me, she said, I thought I was coming, 13 years in advertising. I know it all. I've been there, done it, worked with every possible kind of brand. So I was going to come and, tell CRY how to do its brand work. And she said, I come here and I realized everything that I know doesn't work. I have to completely unlearn what I've learned and relearn. And so what I realized was that when we talked about realizing full potential, I think what CRY offered and continues to offer people is an opportunity to come in and make a difference, make a tangible impact in the lives of children, especially from a CRY point of view, but also you come in and you learn, you come in and you grow as a professional, you come in and you grow as a human being, you come in and you grow in community, so I think it allows you to realize your full potential. And I think that is finally what actually draws people and keeps people here, even though we really don't pay sustainable salaries at all.
Right. Minister Mausum, how would you develop a workforce which would, which can be built around what the Maldives brand stands for? Like, does it happen through the education system or training in the workforce? So what happens and how would you build a workforce which would display what the Maldives brand stands for?
For a destination brand, I think it is rather easy because Maldives, for Maldives to be what Maldives is, we have got God-given nature's endowment, beautiful islands, marine flora and fauna, and the beautiful Maldives people with a very warm hospitality. So those are given, but we have to let tourists see them. And comes then various service dimensions and product dimensions that individual brands come, and when they see there is a niche market, they come here. We have for example, seaplane, which has become part of the experience of the Maldives. That has enabled the Maldives seaplane fleet to be the biggest in the world. Then small niche things like skydiving, these type of things are becoming popular as people come in. So I think the strength of the Maldives lie in the diversity, and the people of the country are very important, and all our success attributes. For example, last 2 years, the biggest message we have to give is that of safety and security in terms of COVID. And how is it portrayed to the guests? Through our messaging, that's one thing. But I think the strongest message is through guests. So I think today, many brands, they like to involve guests in the total experience and let them talk of the brand values, what the brand stands for, so that it's more credible. When we say something that you can take off the mask in a resort island, it may be difficult to believe, but when you see Bollywood stars flooding the Instagram with their Maldives experience, that's very credible. And I think that's where we gave very huge attention to the first impression at the airport. When people arrive, we have that safety image, and we managed to get the global safety certificates. We gave IMVACCINATE badges to the staff community. So at given times, you have to strengthen on particular aspects of the brand. And I think it's very important that everybody sings the same song. Otherwise, it will be confusing. And for us, increasing the quality of service is very, very important. So we are into continuous training. As the safety aspect, we have very strict safety regulation. That's why I mentioned in terms of regulation, we have, when we give the room to creativity, environment and safety and security are two components we look a bit closer into. The beauty of having international sub-brands to push Maldives is very good, because the international brands, they have their brand values that is followed through as a panelist. Couldn't see the name there. Yeah, Harish Bhatt mentioned the whole organization. Everybody has to have the value of it, totally believe and portray it. So these international brands do that, and because of the success of international brands, the local brands are also following on it. Training, because we have to make sure that we give perfect service, and we believe that Maldives have to compete with the other destinations. Even though we are world's leading consecutively for 2 years, we know that we have to compete every day. So we are working towards that, and ensure that everybody gives what Maldives is portrayed as, a destination that people can come and have a nice holiday in whatever dimension they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pavin. Thank you, Minister. And my last question to you, Mr. Bhatt. We all know that people aspire to work with the Tatas. But the current workforce, whether it's the millennials who are in their mid-age currently, or the Gen Z who are starting to work, based on who we are, how are we trying to stay relevant to that group of the workforce?
So very relevant question, Ekta, and here's my perspective on that. First and foremost, I think millennials and Gen Z seek a work culture, a work environment, which may be very different from my generation. And it's important to create that work culture and work environment in every organization, no doubt about it. But I'm going back to the idea of the brand. The idea of the brand cannot change. And it is true that alongside interesting work, alongside a very different work environment from what earlier generations were used to. One of the things that millennials and Gen Z, are seeking is really brands with a purpose. They want to join organizations which they think are doing some good. I can see this when I speak to my daughter. I can see this when I speak to children of my colleagues who are in their 20s. And I can see that they clearly say there are some brands and some organizations they would love to work for because they believe in the purpose of that brand.
Right.
This is not just about the Tata Group, it's about many other brands which have a sense of purpose as well. So because we have such an inherent and strong sense of purpose, my belief is that many people from Gen Z and many people from the millennial generation are joining the Tata Group and enjoying working with us because they know that when they work for the Tata Group, they're also contributing back to the community, contributing back to the society. So that's the other central organizing principle of the brand, which I think is bringing millennials and Gen Z in. But having said that, I think it's important to create the right environment for the much younger generation, ensure that we are on the ball with what they require from their work, what they require from their workplaces. And we need to understand those needs and not expect that they will have the same needs as the generations which have gone by. The Tata Group has been very successful in attracting millennials and Gen Z people into many of our group companies because of these organizing principles.
Right. Brilliant. I think we are at the end of our panel. Thank you so much to all the three of you. I think the discussions went to a completely different level. Over to you, Tarun, for the question from the Q&A.
Hi, panel members. That was an absolutely enticing conversation. What I would like to ask is a question put forward, which is, how does a brand like Tata institutionalize value, especially at the ground level among people? I think Mr. Bhatt touched upon this slightly, and how does it transcend even beyond the TCOC?
Yeah. So I touched upon that briefly. Very good question. Thank you for this question. I touched upon it briefly in one of my earlier answers. I think the Tata Code of Conduct, as well as the Tata Business Excellence Model, which I described, bring the core principles of the brand into the day-to-day lives of all of us within the organization. In addition, while I've also already described that, in addition, what we also do is we ensure that the principles of our founder, Jamshedji Tata, the principles of other iconic leaders in the group like J.R.D. Tata are kept alive. So every year you will see a celebration on Founders Day on the 3rd of March, where we talk about why Jamshedji Tata, the why of the organization, why did he set us up, and what should we do to live up to his values. And that happens across the Tata Group. Every year on 29th of July, which is J.R.D. Tata's birthday, you will see a J.R.D. Tata Quality Excellence Night, which and Excellence Awards event, which people across the group participated. So apart from the Tata Code of Conduct and the Tata Business Excellence Model, I think it's very important to keep the stories of your iconic leaders. For instance, Pavin mentioned Rupan and his dreams in setting up CRY. That's a very inspiring story for everyone who works in CRY, of why he set up. So the why of the organization has to, like many people have said, the why is much more important than the how. All of us will learn to do the how, but getting the why into all our minds is important. And that often comes by keeping the founders' ideals alive. It often comes by talking of iconic leaders of the group and how they have actually exemplified, how they have lived those values in their life. And it also comes through, talking about many employees who have typified and exemplified those values and making heroes out of them, so that each of us know that is the kind of behavior which is celebrated in our group. So there are many other things that we do, but that is I think a short answer to a very interesting question.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Bhatt.
And if I may also add, as an answer to that question, it's not a question of explaining concepts or philosophies. I think these are best told through real stories. What has really happened? Stories hold our imagination. Real life stories of what our leaders have done, of what our colleagues have done. That is what I think captures the imagination and ensures that values become tangible in front of your eyes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I believe we are at the end of time. So my apologies to the audience members for not having been able to take up more questions. I would now like to thank our panel members for having shared the time that they have shared with us. What becomes very evident from this captivating conversation and through the variety of experience that our panel members have brought is that the brand, or rather the founding principles, are not just something that are applicable just in the corporate world. They transcend into the development sector, attracting talent across industries, and apply to nations as well, and apply to such an extent that another equivalent cannot simply replicate, even if they try to. And like Mr. Bhatt rightfully put, the founding factors resonate across generations, not just across industries. And when we look at other components of the business, or of all the stories that we have heard today, any other component of a business is incapable of having the the impact that is as large and far-reaching as the impacts of these driving values of that of a brand. It has been an absolute privilege to have, for all of us at EQUITOR, to have all of you panel members and our audience members as well. I would like to thank each and everybody for their unique perspectives and for making an evening absolutely captivating. I would now like to move on to the next section of our evening, which is where we try to capture in a very short 5-second presentation, so that we can get the essence of some of the biggest contributors who have contributed to the last 20 years of our stuff, of us. This is where it's compulsory to say the words, "Can you see my screen?" Okay, we would like to start with, I am not sure whether Shishir has been able to join us already, but we would like to start with Shishir, is because ideally you should start with something that is a very calming presence, at least on the surface, and something that has been relentless even in the face of very tight deadlines that we somehow face. If we had to put to vote, there have been multiple people who have heavily contested for this position, who are very, very calming, very, very contributive across sections. But Shishir's name came up very, very high when we talk about the fact that it's okay. It's a deadline. We will meet it. This is A, B, C, and D. Freaking out is probably Y, X, and Z. We would like now to go to the next section, which is like you all already met Ms. Napita Sampath at the beginning of the session, she's been the longest team member at EQUITOR, 12 plus years. You've already heard her thought processes earlier, and we just could not let this section of the presentation go away, or the evening go away without giving her a note of thanks. Last but not the least, we would like to talk about Miss Namada Pichukumar. She is our, I believe she's in the audience members. Yes, I think she is. It's very difficult to capture this person but let's be gentle and say that the simple presence was enough to elevate the average energy levels inside of a room, let's say. And she's also the reason why majority of the current EQUITOR team members are call each other team members right now. And my major takeaway from my short little conversations with her, with a capital sarcasm, is that she had the acute sense of noticing something inside of an individual that perhaps they themselves do not notice very actively, or would rather not notice at all. I would now like to move on to our travel partners, Mr. Rampal and Mr. Zubin. There is Mr. Rampal casually sitting what I hope is a much probably a very nice evening somewhere. They have been with us for at least more than 15 years probably, and they are technically the reason why EQUITOR has earned the tag that quite punctual. They are always there when we have asked them for. These are the individuals who have contributed to that extent to our to the last 20 years. I would also like to mention Indie Homes. Apologies for the underline. Without them, we would literally be homeless, and figuratively as well. If I allow RJT to talk about this session will be slightly longer than we would like to intend it to. And lastly, we would like to close by thanking Hansa Research as well. Because of their contributions, our data stands out the way that it actually does. And just before I close, I would like to invite RJT to do the closing remarks. RJT, over to you. RJT, you're on mute.
I'm not on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Yeah. So very quickly, firstly, thank you to all the people who gave so generously of their time. Senior people with with very busy schedules. I think it lit up the evening completely. We couldn't have thought of a better way of celebrating 20 years. Thank you so much to all of you, each and every one of you participated. There are 2 or 3 things perhaps would be right to talk about because it's about the future. It's strange that the anachronism is talking about the future, but nevertheless, it's my job to do it. Firstly, last year, I gave up operational control of the firm, and we believe that the founder's mentality is not really what is good enough for the future. And therefore, you have 3 people, much younger people, coming from 3 very different, let me say, perspectives, very different skills and very different inclinations. Someone like Ekta, who runs operations, who's very good at building capacity and capability. Someone like Siddharth, who did the first panel, whose driving passion is knowledge. So he wants to know what's the latest happening in our world at any point of time and keeps us updated. He's a chief knowledge officer. And someone like Sharon, who was not able to speak today because she was unwell, but somebody who holds up our standards to extremely high scrutiny. And nothing can pass her eye, which is of a 98% or 99% standard. So these are the 3 people who in whose hands EQUITOR is going to be for the next, I don't know how many zillion years, as Pervin said. But I'm grateful that they were able to take up the responsibility, and I can sort of relax looking at the future. The other couple of things which are worth talking about is we hope to bring out our first book called $1 Trillion Baby next year, which talks about family businesses that have built huge standards and gone global. India has many exemplars of such businesses. Some of the stories we've heard today. We hope to bring it to the fore so that India can take note of some of these companies and build economic policy that will give us the authority that we deserve in the world, as some of our very iconic leaders in the recent past have shown, like Leena Nair and like Parag. Finally, our partnership with KPMG is worth speaking about. We are grateful for that partnership. You will see some very exciting new thought leadership coming out in January or February. We don't want to speak about it now, but watch the space and you will be able to see it. Last but not the least is our media partners. We work with them closely on the marketing awards, and it's been a great partnership so far. We look forward to continuing it for the next foreseeable future. Those are the interesting things that everyone can look forward to. But I think today has shown that the spirit is alive and well. All the people who participated along with us were part of this evening. Thank you all, and best of luck.